Hi everyone, welcome to this month's Restoring Neighborhoods Task Force meeting. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to dive into a presentation from Christopher Tomey with Habitat for Humanity. Before we do that, per our usual, we are going to run through some policy updates and some event announcements. So with that, I will turn it over to Caitlin.
Hi everyone, this is Caitlin Snyder with the National Housing Conference. I want to give everyone just an update on appropriations. So earlier this week, the omnibus spending bill that will fund the federal government for the remainder of fiscal year 17 was released. We expect the House to pass it today, potentially this afternoon, and for the Senate to pass it later this week. So many of the programs saw slight increases in funding compared to last year, but overall funding is flat, especially when considered relative to rising housing costs. I wanted to point out that this budget does not include requests from President Trump to zero out choice neighborhoods and SHOP and to fund CDBG at $1.3 billion. Instead, CDBG is funded at roughly $3 billion and choice and SHOP are funded. Also in the bill are a few provisions that we wanted to make you aware of. So one of those is extending the sunset for the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. So that was set to expire October 1st of this year, and they've now extended the sunset to October 1st of 2018. Another provision raises the rental assistance demonstration, or otherwise RAD, cap to 225,000 units. Another one appropriates $15 million for the Jobs Plus program with the public housing funding. And then finally, continuing allowing private owners of Section 8 properties to make family self-sufficiency programs available to residents. So if you want more details, I'd encourage you to check out the blog post that Rebecca and I put together earlier this week. Included in the blog post is a chart that shows funding for selected programs within HUD and USDA. For this year, President Obama's FY17 budget request, and then all the way back to fiscal year 2014. And so once this bill is passed, we're expecting attention to shift to FY 2018. The full budget is supposed to be released the week of May 22nd, and then that will kick off subcommittee and full committee hearings. The calendar is a little bit tight to get full fiscal year 2018 appropriations bills, but one upshot is that the bill that's working its way through Congress right now is a pretty decent bill, and if we were to do a CR for all of fiscal year 18, that would be an okay thing. So I'd encourage folks who aren't super familiar with the appropriations process to check out Political Pro's recently released guide to the federal budget process. It's free for everyone. You don't have to be a Political Pro member, but it does a really good job of laying out just all the things that need to happen and in what order they happen in for regular appropriations order. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Caitlin. That's great. I just want to point out a couple other things. There's some language, policy language in the approach bill around dealing with distressed housing, specifically in the Section 8 CBRA portfolio. So folks are digging in to see kind of what's new authority for HUD versus what's kind of reiterating existing authority for HUD. But a couple places in the bill where they touch on that issue, so I want to raise that for folks. And I also want to mention that the bill also funds the CDFI fund at its highest level since the program began, so that's a big positive in the bill. A couple other quick updates. Hopefully everyone's seen, but the White House has announced their plans to nominate Pam Patenaude as the Deputy Secretary for HUD. She is currently the president of the Terwilliger Foundation and previously served as the director of the Bipartisan Policy Center Housing Commission. So we're glad to see her nomination, and we have a statement up on our website, like many other folks. The White House also announced their intent to nominate Neil Ratcliffe as HUD Assistant Secretary for Community Planning and Development. He currently works with Locke Lord, focusing on economic development, affordable housing, and municipal and public law. But he previously served as the director of Houston's Housing and Community Development Department. So starting to see some nominations for those high-level positions at HUD. My last policy update for folks is that President Trump did release his principles for tax reform, Not a lot of detail in there, but it did include plans to lower the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%, to reduce the number of personal income tax brackets from 7 to 3, to double the standard deduction and eliminate many other tax deductions, though it would keep mortgage interest, retirement contributions, and charitable contribution deductions. It didn't include details on cost, phase-in periods, or impacts. A couple of impacts that we'd be concerned about if this plan were to go forward would be lowering the corporate rate so far would clearly impact the low-income housing tax credit and the new markets tax credit programs. And there's concern about the way they're approaching personal income tax brackets from the perspective of some homeownership advocates that removing all the other deductions, even leaving mortgage interest, would hurt homeownership. So just some dynamics to be aware of. The administration has not announced plans for a more detailed proposal, so I'm not sure when we would see that. They are holding listening sessions this month with stakeholders. And the House is continuing to work on their plans for tax reform, which are somewhat different from the President's, and continuing to have hearings. The Senate has not really dived into tax reform this round as of yet, but we'll keep you posted. I also wanted to take a quick second and remind you about 2 upcoming NHC events, our June 8th Gala and our June 9th Policy Symposium. Housing Prom, you don't want to miss it. And our Policy Symposium, we've invited Secretary Carson to keynote for us and have some great panels on connecting diverse interests, where we will be highlighting Habitat for Humanity and Rebuilding Together, as well as some other community development partners, and then focusing on flood insurance because of the real impacts for low-income homeowners there, as well as multifamily affordable housing in flood-prone areas. So do check that out on our website. With that, bear with us while we switch over so Christopher can show his presentation. And I neglected to mention it, but please send questions through the chat box, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation.
Great. Thanks very much, Rebecca. It's great to be here with the task force today. I spent a fair amount of time when this was the foreclosure task force, back in the early days of the task force, working with this group, and love the fact that it's now at a place where it's more forward-looking and less crisis-oriented. And so appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and to talk about a couple of strategies that Habitat's been implementing over the last decade or so. It's really changed the look of the organization and changed the way that we build partnerships and create impact in communities. I think it's really exciting developments that have happened, and I think you'll see that it may not be the Habitat that you remember from the last time you were on site and swung a hammer. Just as a starting point, our vision and our mission. The opening slide had the vision, which is a world where everyone has a decent place to live, and our mission statement. We've always focused very much on the bringing people together, bringing our volunteers together to build homes. But communities has always been right there in the mission statement as well. And I think one of the things you'll see in the developments that have happened over the last decade is that we're taking that community piece a whole lot more seriously. I know the only thing worse than having to sit through presentations about your own organization's strategic plan is having to sit through presentations about some other organization's strategic plan, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but I think this does give an indication of, will give an indication of just how much things have changed at Habitat, and I want to focus today on these first 2 houses of the plan. The first house is really where our construction products and interventions live, and the second is where our advocacy program lives. And I want to focus specifically on this second bullet in the community impact house. And it's not just building homes and serving families, it's actually leveraging shelter as a catalyst for community transformation. And that's a really important change in the way that Habitat looks at its work. And then on the advocacy side, promoting policies and systems that advance access to adequate affordable housing. And I think what I'd point out here, it's not to promote policies and systems that advance Habitat housing. This is looking broadly at housing and how Habitat can leverage its reputation and its voice and its supporters' voices to create real change. And we're serious about how many people we can impact. Our goal right now is 25 million impacted through 2020 globally. And we are well on the way to hitting that goal. Of course, advocacy is lumpy, so you don't have each year you won't have the same kind of progress made. But we have made a lot of progress toward that goal, and I suspect that we will exceed it by a fair amount as of 2020. But both of these are about kind of looking beyond the traditional Habitat model and understanding how we can better serve the communities where we are. And I think, you know, we've always tried to improve our what we're doing for families, but we really had to think things through again in 2007, 2008, when the foreclosure crisis and the Great Recession hit. I think the good news that we got from that was that Habitat's housing model worked great, that we had very low foreclosure rates, we had very low default rates, and so our housing model worked, but it also became very clear that our families in many places weren't succeeding, and a lot of that was because their neighbors were losing their homes and investment wasn't being made in the neighborhoods and the communities where they lived. And so just having that house wasn't enough. And we understand much better now how the only way our investments and our family investments can be as effective as they should be is really by taking a broader approach and understanding the context of the home that we're putting families in. And so we launched our neighborhood revitalization strategy about a decade ago. This is kind of the starting point for it. So it was really, you know, we wanted to empower residents. We, of course, wanted to provide more Habitat products and a broader array of products, which has really been more affiliates kind of doing things so other affiliates had been doing for a while. So we had a number of affiliates that had been doing repairs or whole house rehabs for a long time, but it wasn't a kind of typical thing you would see across Habitat affiliates. Now we have seen those construction interventions really take hold across the network. But I don't think that it's the construction piece that's most important. I think it's that empowerment piece and really trying to get to vibrant, safe, inviting places where our families want to live. When we started with this, we kind of didn't know exactly what we meant. We thought this sounded good and was what we wanted, but we didn't really know what it looked like and how we would get there. So over the last 10 years, we've done a lot of support, a lot of consulting, a lot of technical assistance for affiliates implementing neighborhood revitalization strategies. And to give a sense of how much it's taken hold, we have about 230 affiliates now that officially call themselves neighborhood revitalization affiliates. And that's about 16% of our overall network. We have 1,350 affiliates in the U.S., but they account for over 60% of the products and services that we provide. So the bulk of the impact in the U.S. by Habitat is now being done by affiliates that are looking at how they can impact whole neighborhoods and communities and not just the Habitat partner families that we're providing housing products to. And what we've learned, and over time we've learned what works, what doesn't work, and over the last couple of years have really made some progress on our theory of change. And I'm excited to share now what we're calling our quality of life framework. And this is really the theory of change that our neighborhood revitalization affiliates are using, and we hope this will be a tool to enable more affiliates to engage in this work and to kind of define how Habitat International and affiliates are working together to make these things happen. So I'll walk through this really quickly. At the center of this are the residents in the neighborhoods and communities where we're working, and their dreams, their gifts, their concerns, the associations that are in their communities, and the partners we're working with there. We're going to start from that, and we want to build on what assets are already there in that community. Sense of community, whatever sense of community exists, we want to capture that, and we want to build on it, and we want to get to a point where we really have a high degree of social cohesion. So folks not only know each other, but they're very willing and able to work together on projects. And then we actually want them to get to a point where they are working together collectively, and whether that be kind of projects on the ground, improving the neighborhood where they live, or whether that be advocacy actions that they're taking, kind of the full array of things that a neighborhood might be involved with through collective action. We want to help our affiliates help neighborhoods get to the point where they can take those actions. And these are foundational outcomes that we think Habitat International can play a role in supporting getting affiliates and in neighborhoods to the point where they can achieve these sector outcomes on the outer ring, this variety of different things that people desire to have for their neighborhoods. And it's not an exhaustive list here, and we know that, and we also know these aren't clearly delineated. Lots of them depend on one another and are affected by one another. But it does kind of give a sense of the breadth of things that neighborhoods need and are trying to achieve. And we hope that this is going to be a strong model for getting there. And I think we've seen it working in a number of those neighborhood revitalization affiliates already. Now that's a nice, beautiful chart, but as we've talked to folks about that, about it, and what about our ideas are, they said, yeah, well, how do you actually make this work at the end of the day? There's lots of challenges in the neighborhoods where you're working, and you really need to think through how this is going to be used to address those challenges. And this is, again, isn't an exhaustive list, but some of the ones that our team has focused a great deal on: cycle of poverty, racism, equity, political voice and political power, market failures, disinvestment. So, you know, the pretty simple things to deal with in local neighborhoods. But you know, this is reality. This is the world that we live in. This is the world that we work in. And our framework isn't good for much if we're not thinking about how do we work through these barriers that we face. And because neighborhoods are so different and our affiliates are so different, and we knew that there wasn't a one-size-fits-all toolkit or tool that we could provide to make that happen. So what we've tried to encourage affiliates to do is to use a few different lenses as they're working with neighborhoods to move toward their goals. I think these are things that everyone on this call is very, very familiar with. We start with an asset-based community development approach. This is not just in the U.S. If you go anywhere in the world and work with Habitat for Humanity, we're in 70 countries, they take an asset-based approach. They go into a community, some places in the world, it's a very bad slum situation that they're going into, but they look for the things that are already there. What qualities do these neighborhoods and communities have that we can build on? And I don't love this graphic, but it does give a sense of what we want affiliates to understand, which is you have to meet people and families and neighborhoods where they are. And in order for everyone to be successful, again, you can't provide that same intervention every time. And we want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves kind of around the table and have the residents sitting outside. We want to make sure that as we're carrying this forward, part of meeting residents where they are is having them be the folks around the table making the decisions for where their community is going. And Habitat and the other supporting organizations can be there and provide that support, but we need to be enabling them to take the leadership and empowering them to make the changes that they want to achieve. Collaboration is key. There are lots of kind of interrelated goals, and different people are looking for different things in their neighborhoods, and different organizations are working on different pieces of this. And we understand that we're not getting there by working individually. If we want places that are places that we would want to live and want our families, our partner families to live, we have to work together to achieve those qualities and goals. And then finally, we understand, again, that all of this is interrelated. You have to take a systems-based approach. You can't assume that you're going to pull one thread and solve a problem and not have other kinds of effects in the neighborhoods and communities where you're working. partnership, again, is a huge part of everything that we do, and I'll mention a few of our partners at kind of national level partners, but most of the partners that are growing up around neighborhood revitalization are happening at the local level because they're built around the needs of that neighborhood, and so you see a really different kind of set of partnerships that are growing up at the local level to help communities and neighborhoods meet kind of their non-housing needs, areas that Habitat can't provide the direct service, but we can certainly be building those partnerships that can support those needs. I want to mention Thrivent in particular here because they were not even an early adopter. 20 years ago, they came to Habitat and said, we want to work with you, but we want to build neighborhoods. We don't want to build communities. They knew what we have learned over time and have been integral in getting us there. The Federal Home Loan Banks and their member institutions are critically important to the work that we do, and HUD has been very important. Our affiliates, we estimate they received around $300 million through the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. $137.5 million came through a grant to Habitat International, and the rest came through local sources. And that really helped kind of advance our transition to this neighborhood-focused approach. So each of these national level partnerships has provided over $300 million in support of Habitat's work around the country, and we really could not be where we are today in this work without that kind of support. The other thing that I want to touch base on is where I spend most of my time, and that's on Habitat advocacy. And as of 11 years ago, we didn't really have an advocacy program at Habitat. Of course, we did advocacy work, and our affiliates did advocacy work. It's hard to build a house without doing some level of advocacy. But we did not have a strategy in place, and we weren't doing advocacy in an intentional way to really have an impact. And that's something that we've been working hard to create over the last decade. And I think we're really seeing the results of that work blossom in the field now. Our affiliates are having unbelievable impact all around the country. One of the most exciting developments for me was something that happened last year, which was our field came together, our affiliates and our state organizations all around the country, and they created their own advocacy agenda. This is not what Habitat International is telling them they need to be working on in order to reach their goals and improve their work. This is what affiliates have said. These are the things that we are working on that we think we should, as a network, prioritize, and we want your help and support in achieving policy goals in these 5 areas. The first, of course, is homeownership. That's always going to be core to what Habitat does. That's what gives us kind of authenticity and credibility to talk about housing. But that's the smallest part of what our affiliates are doing in the advocacy space. They want to promote access to housing broadly. They understand that homeownership isn't right for everyone, isn't wanted by everyone. And there needs to be a continuum of options available in communities for them really to be successful. We also understand, and our affiliates understand, that their families can't achieve financial stability through their home alone. It's a great asset building opportunity at Habitat, but there are many other things that affect their financial stability. So we need to be advocating for things that are enhancing the financial stability of our families and their long-term prospects. And then the next one is straight to the neighborhoods work that we've been talking about. They don't want to focus just on the Habitat homes and partner families, or even just on housing. They want healthy, vibrant communities to build and preserve housing in. And then finally, we are a global organization, and our affiliates tithe. They give a portion of the money that they raise each year to support our global work. About 90% of the families we serve are outside the United States, and so it's very important to our affiliates that they are responding to the global housing challenge as well. And to give you a sense of kind of how we're seeing this play out in 2017, we provided some advocacy grants Habitat International did to a number of affiliates, and this will give you a sense of the breadth of the work that's happening out there. New York City, they're working on establishing a community land trust there that the Habitat affiliate has taken the lead on. In Pittsburgh, they're working on a housing trust fund. That's not an unusual project, advocacy project for affiliates to be participating in all around the country. Habitat California has just created a new technology platform for mobilizing around state housing and state funding, and couldn't be more critical with what's happened to the redevelopment agencies out there over the last couple of years. In Iowa, we provided a grant to do some communications around home ownership opportunities and benefits. And our South Carolina Association is working not just on affordable housing funding, but some tax relief for lower income folks and to increase home ownership specifically as well. So we hope we'll be seeing some results out of these grants over the next 1 to 2 years. And we have seen some results already of grants that we have provided, and we're really excited about the local success that's happening, because that's really where the work of Habitat happens, and it's really where there's the most ability to have advocacy impact housing and impact Habitat homeowners and their neighbors. In Virginia, we worked very closely with the Virginia Housing Coalition, our state-level organization did, to get some general revenue to kind of model what a trust fund might look like, and then also to do a study so that hopefully they can get a dedicated source for that down the line. And we did provide them a $25,000 grant that helped advance this project. And when we provide these grants, we provide kind of wraparound technical assistance and support as well. We work cooperatively with the affiliates and state offices to do this. And Twin Cities is one of our strongest affiliates. They have been doing advocacy for years. They were founding members of the Homes for All Coalition, the Make Homes Happen Coalition there. They've been really successful at driving both kind of annual appropriations and getting a bond issue passed. And it's resulted in thousands, or is going to result in thousands and thousands of new units, almost none of which will be Habitat units. This is a real fantastic example of an affiliate standing up and saying, we may be the best known houser in this community. If we're going to advance housing, we need to stand up and be heard. And I think that they're achieving what they set out to do. And I did want to give one example of what's happening globally. In Honduras, there was a plan to work with 72 different municipalities and get some housing policies put in place and some resources put in place. 126 separate policies had been achieved by about a year ago. They studied a cross-section of those and saw a significant increase, almost $2 million in housing funding. And as you can see, that funding goes a lot further outside of the United States than it goes here. And with that $2 million, they were able to extend assistance to more than 23,000 people who would not have otherwise received it. And these are the kinds of efforts that we're seeing all around the world. The other thing that Habitat International has done is develop some model legislation and assist in some state-level work. Mortgage licensing has, since the SAFE Act passed before even the Dodd-Frank came into place, it really caused some challenges and some expense for Habitat affiliates, and actually some of the training required was for them to learn about mortgage products that no Habitat affiliate would ever provide to anyone. And ultimately, they've been able to get exempted in 35 states from those requirements. The state banking regulators have said, you really don't fit what these regulations are intended to do. And Illinois and Massachusetts are working this year on legislation based on some model legislation that we had put together. And we've also pulled together state-level homeownership development tax credit legislation modeled after New Mexico program. Iowa, Georgia, and California are all planning on having bills introduced this year. We actually have a state legislator in Georgia who's the CEO of a Habitat affiliate who's kind of driving the train down there. And so we hope that we're going to see some good results from those efforts. And then I did want to just say a couple of words. We do have a global advocacy campaign that we've implemented, and it's been very exciting. It's addressing 4 problems that we've seen. It's around access to land for shelter, and is basically divided into 4 different focus areas: tenure, gender, disasters, and slum upgrading. And the target is to improve access to land for 10 million people through policies and systems change. These are the activities that are being undertaken and kind of what we're trying to do today as part of the campaign. We have made some major accomplishments. 12 campaign partners, raised about $2 million, have made grants to 7 countries, kind of similar to the advocacy grants that we've made in the United States. We're making those globally to our national offices that are looking to do advocacy work, and we've enrolled 13 countries so far. As you can see here, is where we've launched the campaign. And what we're hoping is that this Solid Ground campaign is going to be a model for a U.S. campaign focused on housing affordability. We're working now to develop the planning for that, and hopefully within the next 1 to 2 years we'll have the resources to implement that in the U.S. And would encourage you to go and visit our campaign website for Solid Ground if you're interested, and it's at solidgroundcampaign.org. So that's a quick kind of look at 2 ways that Habitat has really changed the way that it operates, and in seeking to better serve its partner families and to reach its impact beyond Habitat partner families, and would be more than happy to answer any questions to folks. I should have mentioned one other thing. The Quality of Life Framework, that was just released at our global conference. It's still really in draft form, and so if you have thoughts, I know folks on here may see that and see weaknesses in the framework, have suggestions to make, criticisms, we'd love to hear all that. We expect this to continue to go through iterations, and we want to improve it. So if something there is interesting to you, if you have some input you'd like to give, we would love to have that.
Well, thank you so much, Christopher. Again, folks, feel free to send questions along. And while you are thinking of those, we have some in the room. We'll start here.
Thanks. So I want to go back to one of the numbers you cited pretty early, housing opportunities for $25 million through advocacy by 2020. What types of inputs are going into that you're measuring?
Well, we are trying to measure our advocacy globally now. It's not a simple thing to do, especially when lots of our national organizations have never done advocacy. So when advocacy organizations that have been doing it for decades don't really know how to count it, it's really hard to get folks who are new to it to count. What we ask them to do is kind of make their best argument for how many people are impacted and how much money has been mobilized or saved through a particular policy change that's been achieved. And we don't ask them to say, what percentage of the change did you were you responsible for? If they feel like they had some responsibility for that policy change, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and count that. And what I was saying about kind of the lumpiness of it, we had a couple of million for a couple of years that were impacted, and then suddenly we had a policy passed in Brazil and 10 million in Brazil alone in that 1 year. And so, you know, it varies from year to year. We're not seeing a year over year kind of, we can't say 5 million a year. We're going to work up to 10 million a year, but we are seeing progress toward that goal.
Thank you.
John?
Chris, sorry, I was a little late. Jonathan Horowitz from Lytton. I just wanted to start off by acknowledging the extraordinary work that Habitat has been doing. When I was still at HUD, I had a lot of really challenging meetings while I was there. I would say that really one of the very best ones I had was with you and the rest of the Habitat leadership team. And we really got a preview of all of the thinking that had been going on that ultimately led to what you're reporting on today. It's really just remarkable. So I wanted to just say that. My question was just a follow on a little bit to what Caitlin was saying, not on the measurement, but sort of I think all of us are sort of rededicating our efforts to working with, I was going to say local affiliates. I think LIF as a CDFI, I remember in talking, to you all and sort of discovering that kind of, Habitat, local habitats were not sort of like the 8th Army, where a diktat comes down centrally and goes out, and I think all of us, face that, and as a CDFI, we don't even have affiliates. We have people, we invest in projects on many different stakeholders, and I'm just interested in sort of any lessons that you all have sort of learned in sort of working with your affiliates, really focused here in the States, as your agenda has evolved, maybe some are doing more advocacy, just sort of anything that might be useful for the rest of us who are sort of now maybe working more with local folks.
Absolutely, and thanks for the compliments there, Jonathan. I appreciate it. You were there. You did see very early on what our thinking was, and not necessarily such clear thinking at that point, but that really was at kind of the beginning point of this transition that we've made, and particularly on the advocacy side of things, you know, it is cat herding, and with an organization as old as Habitat and with folks kind of set in their ways, it has not been easy to get folks on board. And up until about 1996, the general assumption among Habitat folks is we don't even take government money. We don't take government money. We don't want government to change who Habitat is, and we don't want to change who government is. And it was in 1996 with the advent. I mean, that was ignoring the local advocacy that was having to happen to build the houses. But in '96, when the SHOCK program was created, that was really the start of turning the tide. First, in understanding that Habitat can work with government and not lose its identity, that it can actually help us advance and improve our work. And I think over time, affiliates have seen that that's the case. And but I think you know, within the Habitat network, and I suspect with most networks or grantees, they're most interested in each other and what each other's successes have been. You know, I can go to them and tell them the ROI on advocacy all day long, and they're not going to believe it until another affiliate says, wow, well, you know what? We went out and did some advocacy work, and it wasn't even for home ownership, and we got 4 new donors as a result of it because they were interested to see what we were doing. That's the kind of thing that has really made it work. And so what we've tried to do is, as much as we can, lift up those examples and say, look at what happened in Twin Cities. They got a $200 million bond issue passed, and they maybe built 3 houses with that, but the relationships that they've built are going to build 20 houses. And I think it's that affiliate to affiliate contact. So at Habitat International, we try to document those successes. We try to highlight them. We try to find opportunities to bring affiliates together so they can talk to one another and learn from one another. And I do think the fact that they came together to come up to put forward this national advocacy agenda that's theirs is an enormous turning point, because it's them not just saying, yes, this is something that we should do, and we'll take the tools that you give us and send the email or whatever it is, that make the phone call, whatever we need to do that. It's them taking it on and saying, this is my neighborhood, this is my community, and it's my advocacy that's going to make the difference. And we want you, Habitat International, to come and support what we're doing, not telling us what we need to be supporting for you. And I think we couldn't be happier to have things move in that direction.
Thanks.
With the advocacy grants, I was just curious how they work in terms of, is it to like empower affiliates who haven't really done it before? Is it like existing efforts to try to accelerate what they're doing?
It's kind of both. So we wanted to look at kind of 2 buckets of opportunity. One was, are there models that affiliates are trying to implement with their advocacy work that might be useful and replicable across the network, and things that we want to test. And the other piece is, where are they in this whatever advocacy goal that they're trying to achieve, and can an investment made at this point help push them over and accomplish that goal? And so those are really the 2 considerations. So it's resulted in a variety. We've tried to get some affiliates that have done very little advocacy work involved. Obviously, with our New York City affiliate, some of those have been highly involved in advocacy for a long time. So you get a mix of those affiliates, which helps us better understand at Habitat International what are the different kinds of tools you need for the different kinds of affiliates that are doing this work. So it's been a nice mix. I hope that it will continue in that way. Most of the grants have been more along kind of push over the goal line rather than testing models. But I'm hoping in the context of a U.S. campaign at some point down the line, we can see the number and amount of those grants increase significantly, because almost every one of those grants that we've given has resulted in some sort of positive outcome at the end of the day.
I just want to follow up. Where is the funding for those grants coming from?
That's donor funding from Habitat. So we budget for that funding in our government relations and advocacy budget.
Awesome.
And as we look forward and hopefully we'll fundraise to launch a campaign, that will be a major part of fundraising for that campaign. And the Solid Ground campaign, they raise money specifically to provide grants to our national offices to do the work.
So I'm not seeing any other questions come in. I have one more question, and then we'll see if there's any more in the room. But I wanted to go back to your state level example on homeownership tax credit or tax incentive and what that model is. One, I know we had something similar at the federal level during the housing crisis that's since gone away. But also, one thing that, CFPB just did a report on the homeownership divide. The task force is very interested in underserved markets and homeownership, and we'll be bringing in some speakers in July. So I'm just kind of curious about this idea and how that might help with that dynamic.
I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Homeownership credit.
Yeah, the model, the New Mexico model for the credit is it's for donations to an organization to do homeownership development. So they get the credit for that. And I think, I don't think Habitat will do anything different in the way that we operate to reach underserved communities. That's kind of everything that we do,
right,
is reaching underserved communities. You can't get a Habitat loan unless you can't get a bank loan. So I think it enables us to do more of the work where that tax credit is available. But I don't know that it really changes the way that we're going about that work. I think that the ownership model that we've implemented and has developed over time works well, and I think that that model will not change radically with a different funding source.
With the New Mexico credit, were they able to amplify their production because of that?
I think statewide housing production was amplified. We don't have a huge network in New Mexico, so the New Mexico credit wasn't a Habitat. That wasn't a Habitat project. I actually don't know to what extent it's impacted us. I only think we have 4 or 5 affiliates in the state, and not huge capacity affiliates. So I don't know what the impact has been there.
Yes.
If there's someone online, I was just going to say that very interested to hear. It's not really a pleasure, but to hear about your experiences as the advocacy grants, go forward. I think. Again, we're all working. I think we're all working much more closely with local folks to try to build that advocacy capacity. And there's a limited set of people who are able to to fund it and certain pieces of it, et cetera. I think sort of the range of Habitat of affiliates geographically and others, gives a really great, and also your model, gives us a really great couple of case studies that we can all learn from. I've had some experience in a prior life with the advocacy grants, and I think they always have a huge impact, even if it's sometimes hard to come up with some of the metrics. But it'll be really helpful to hear the experiences, so that if we all have opportunities to do something similar, that we're as effective as possible. And I know a lot of Habitat donors are individual donors, right?
Yes.
Which is something that I think hasn't really been in the rest of the field. Individual donors have not typically donated for that,
right?
Which would be something that would be great if we're,
and
says the advocate.
Yeah. And in all honesty, we haven't broken the code on fundraising practices by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that it's an easier conversation, definitely on the individual donor side, than it is on the corporate side a lot of the time. But we've found many of our corporate partners to be very interested in the advocacy work that we're doing, and even if it's just because it's showing impact in the neighborhoods that they care about, not even because it's helping it's necessarily helping them.
Right.
But I think definitely we are working to document the grants that we've given, and I appreciate the interest, and we will work on getting that documentation and those case studies in a form that.
Or even just talking. I don't want to make people write stuff they don't need to, but just sort of being in touch with each other, you know, and now I know this, that if we have an opportunity to provide some support to local stakeholders, you know, what could be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great, and you know, maybe there's opportunities down the road when this neighborhood work is going on for several of our organizations that are working in the area to put some grant money out there to get some advocacy, get some real policy changes happening.
All right, well with that, I will, oh, sorry.
Quick question. For people who are not already connected to Habitat in their coalition, or is the best thing to sort of figure out, how would they figure out if there's a statewide organization? What's the best way for folks to connect who aren't as connected?
Sure. The best thing to do is go to habitat.org, to our website, and there's a tab there where we work. And you can go there and enter the name of the place you live or enter your zip code, and it will tell you the local Habitat affiliate that's there. If you're looking for a state organization, our state support organizations, they don't actually do construction, but they do advocacy. That's one of their main responsibilities. So if you're looking to make a contact in the state around advocacy, I would just do a Google search for Habitat or for HFH and the state. And in 30 states, we do have state-level organizations, and that will pop up. And if they are not as involved in the advocacy necessarily, they will know who in the state is involved and can get you connected to the right folks. And I guess I'd mention one other thing that I didn't mention in my remarks. If you do visit habitat.org and you can find the advocacy section, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do, it's down on the last tab, but we do have publications and resources there. We just released our annual shelter report at our global conference. It is focused on permanent affordability and has a lot of examples of how Habitat is doing that, but is really speaking to the importance of longer-term and permanent affordability models more broadly than just Habitat. So I would encourage you to go and take a look at that as well.
Well, that's a great segue because you did that report in partnership with the Grounded Solutions Network, right?
Yes, absolutely.
They will be at our June meeting, Grounded Solutions and Center for Community Progress. They're going to talk about land banks. So that will be our June topic. And then in July, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at underserved markets and homeownership and the role of housing counseling. We'll have Craig Nickerson and Lot Diaz from the National Council of La Raza. And hopefully a lender representative. So it should be a fascinating conversation in July. So stay tuned. And with that, I will close us out. Thanks so much to everyone for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.